Om Shanti. So, we will be creating storms. Silence is many, many different things, and we will look into quite a few of them. You're used to the idea of physical silence, which means you don't talk and you like a place which doesn't have any noise. That's physical silence. And that is called sense perception. Spirituality is connected with the idea of going to a kind of perception which is not the same as sense perception. So when you are practicing silence physically, that's a very basic level. It's in a way artificial because it is not normal for there to not be any noise. I remember when I was about 10 or something, quite small, and I went to my grandfather's house, which was on top of a mountain in the middle of France, seeing if I could find silence. And so I investigated as many physical silent places. In my grandfather's place, at any time, day or night, there was always some sound of a tractor or some agricultural something, or an airplane, and I traveled around and I found one place on earth which was actually silent. And that was quite deep in the Sahara Desert. And it was quiet. And immediately when I felt this, I thought, you know what, self, this is totally impractical. If you want physical silence, that's not really what you're after, I think. So while physical silence is nice and good and for a retreat, but silence that is beyond sense perception is really the kind that is accessible any time, but it is not easy to become independent of sense perception while perceiving through the senses. There are some people, they close their eyes and they think that will make visible phenomena go away. It doesn't. You have plenty of television shows while your eyes are shut. Or you can put your fingers in your ears or put some earplugs and it doesn't stop the chatter of the mind. While people do think that silence is physical, it really is just a beginning. And a lot of time people use sound to distract themselves from their inner disturbances. You put on TV or you put on music or something to distract your mind from disturbing things that are inside. That's physical silence. Then you see there is emotional silence. So another word for that is dispassion. Most people like to be passionate about this and that, right? Dispassion is an interesting thing to consider. There are thoughts, feelings, memories, things that awaken internal wounds. And our relationship with those can be dispassionate. Usually it isn't dispassionate. Usually it is those things that psychologists talk about, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all of this stuff which you're aware about. In the world of your own mind, there are so many things going on, the self-talk. The real discipline of silence is there inside your mind. When you are working with silence in an effective way, you are concentrated. concentration plays a very major role in the achievement of inner silence and dispassion. What do you concentrate on? Sometimes, if it's really physically silent, you can find that quite disturbing because there is no distraction. You're just with your mind. An important part of this weekend of silence is to investigate care for the mind, care how you use your mind, because your mind is a very potent instrument which becomes impotent because most people don't know very well what it is, how it works, and what it's for. Yoga, there is a word for yoga in the Indian language, Hindi language, Sanskrit language, manmana bhav. And the word for the mind is man. What it means is that you tune your mind to the mind of God. Do you know how to do that? No. You might have many things that you do to tune your mind to the universe, to the infinite, and you might just do that just for yourself and not think of it as anything particular of a practice or a philosophy or something like that. You just do. These things are not much defined and described because they're not physical. When you separate yourself from sense perception, and then you find there's a different type of perception, which is not sense perception. And the mind is the instrument that perceives things which are not physical. And because the mind itself is not physical, bringing yourself independently of sense perception causes you to come closer to this type of perception, which is non-sense perception. Sense perception is hearing, seeing, touching, smelling, tasting. This is sense perception. All your sense perceptions are recorded in your memory. And when you sit quiet, they all come piling into your mind. Then you don't have any quiet because of all this overload of sense perception. I once did an experiment about sensory overload. I thought, okay, let me see if this works. I used to live in Los Angeles, and every time anybody came to visit, they all wanted to go to Disneyland. Normally in Disneyland, you have to wait in a queue before you go to the ride, and then you have a big sense overload. But if you go in the wintertime on a rainy, cold day, there's nobody around. So that means you can go on all the rides without any waiting, and then you can get full sensory overload. So I wanted to experiment, okay, what happens when you have full sensory overload? So you can have a whole day of Disney rides, which are all with ghosts and I don't know what, all kinds of things. You go up and down and round at great speed. And what happens to a person when they have sensory overload? It does something to your brain which is harmful. Your brain has vibrations, a certain type of vibration that needs to be there for you to experience being in harmony with yourself. It's physical. And it gets disturbed by sensory overload. If you overwork, it will do that. And if you do anything to extreme, which is what most people like to do, you disturb your internal brain function that is there to keep you internally balanced. All of this is mucked up by just living on Earth in a world of lots of sensory overload, which means you cannot detach yourself from sense perception. Your mind has been damaged by sensory overload. And so your physical body and your mind will not cooperate with you to come back to normal. You can have some excesses and then come back to normal, but if you have all the time excesses, you can't come back to normal. And so most people are in that condition. And this sort of thing is also established by different types of trauma. Childhood trauma is normal, not exceptional, because of how people think they should raise children and how the school system thinks they should educate children. And all of this is quite disturbing for the mind and brain. And it makes you compliant slaves. If you want to make somebody a slave, you disturb them to such an extent that they do what you want. So having passed through all that, the question arises, okay, can I restore myself to serenity, calm, peace? Can I exercise my right to make myself free from external influences which come through the sense organs? For this, you have to establish a certain vibration that's not physical, not emotional, a different type of silence, which maybe we can use the word spiritual. A spiritual silence is because the spirit is not part of the body. Your soul is not part of your body. When you connect yourself with your soul and disconnect yourself from the body while being in the body, then it can take you to this type of spiritual silence, which I think is a healing process. Healing the mind, healing the brain, healing everything physical, because the physical, the emotional, psychological, all of this depends on the state of the soul. But the soul is intangible. So you cannot perceive the soul through sense perception. And the oddest thing is that people who meditate or want to learn to meditate want to have experiences, but they tend to not differentiate between physical, emotional, spiritual perception. An experience is something you perceive. So you say, okay, I want to perceive peace. And you can perceive peace as the absence of disturbance. But you say, okay, I don't want to perceive a negative, I want to perceive a positive. Right? Absence of something is a negative. In religious talk, they speak of peace that passes human understanding. So that is a spiritual thing. And to go there, you want to go slowly beyond the physical body, beyond the emotional body, to just the soul by itself. And for that, you need concentration. The symbol of concentration is a point of light, because it doesn't have any dimension. Anything which has a dimension is physical. The only thing possible that you can define that doesn't have a dimension is a point. That's geometry. But you can conceive of it. You can think of it. If you concentrate by force, you will get a headache. So that's not a solution. If you concentrate by rotation, you will not get a headache. Now, rotation is what is used if you want to make a hole in the wall. You use a drill, goes round and round, makes a nice hole in the wall. It's not a point, but it's a bit bigger. But it arrives into existence because of rotation. It's optics. You understand that you have a pinhole and light goes through that pinhole, you go to another space. In the world of spiritual practice, you're in the material world. And in order for you to experience or make contact with this type of spiritual peace, you have to go through a small point of light. It puts you on a dimension which is not physical. Then your soul is there anyway. But you are here. And your soul is anyway with you when you're here. Is that right? Are you here with your soul or without? No, I think if you don't have a soul, you're dead. So you are here with your soul. But your mind is engaged with the world through your sense organs. And so the orientation of your mind is to the physical. And because of this sensory overload is not optional, it's mandatory. And you don't really have much choice about it, other than get drunk, take drugs, or do something which covers it over. But it doesn't solve any problem at all. So this method in meditation is to bring yourself to this other dimension by focusing on the idea of yourself as a point of light. And when you do that and you rotate your thought, because the mind will not stay still without getting rigid. You don't want rigidity in the mind because it creates tension. And when you have tension, you're stuck in physical. So you rotate thoughts concerning this point of light so that your mind is in motion, but it's not going off in any other direction. It stays in a rotation by thoughts that are connected with each other, that keep you on the point. And when you do that, you will naturally go to that other dimension. And you will feel it, but you will not feel it as a sense perception. You will feel it as a non-sense perception. It's a perception. But your sense of what you're perceiving is not physical anymore. It becomes something you might want to call etheric as compared with physical. Etheric means the ether is an element of matter, but it's very subtle. The human being has a subtle form, which is in between the material body and the soul. And when you are doing this type of practice, at least you can access the subtle form. Because when you go all the way to just the soul, then you have silence which doesn't have any feeling about it. This may be scary. Because you might ask yourself, do I exist? And this question arises because you tend to equate the sense of existence with sense perception. If I can feel it, it's there. If I can feel myself, I'm here. If I can't feel my body, I don't know if I'm here or not. So when you go there, you can't feel your body anymore. But you can feel yourself. And yourself is fundamentally at peace. So when you try to do this, you will experience a lot of resistance. And if you fight against that resistance, you will experience that you cannot win and that you will have a lot of tension. A important question is how to work with resistance. And also to understand what are the various different things that cause the resistance so that you can slowly over time remove that. And this is all connected with the karma, because your karma starts in your mind. Whether it's an act of mind or a verbal act or a physical act, it all starts in your mind and it goes back to your mind. To take care of your mind involves taking care of your karma. And taking care of your karma is best done when your conscience is very well sharpened. A symbol for your conscience is a knife. You've heard about splitting hairs. When somebody's very particular about something, and then they're splitting hairs. It's very difficult to split hairs because they're so thin. When you want to do something, or think something, or say something, it could be a right thing or a wrong thing. So what makes that thing a right thing or a wrong thing is certainly not morality. Because morality doesn't have a clue about right and wrong. That's public opinion. It occasionally gets it right, but only occasionally. You want to get it right always. For you. Forget about public opinion, that's their own problem. But when you want to think a thought, what will cause a thought to come up is some kind of experience. And then that thought may damage your mind. So then you have to stop it. That's a form of taking care of your mind. You say to that thought, no, thank you very much. No access here. Your mind is to use different analogies, but it's like a big mirror which is reflecting lots of things. In many ways, you want it to be like a blue sky with just nothing but blue sky. Or you say, okay, I will have nighttime mind, and it has got stars in it. Very nice. And you might say, okay, we saw the sunset. That was the sky with colors. Very nice. But in your mind is not just thoughts, but there are pre-verbal feelings. And these are all karma. Different type of emotions that you could feel that you can't necessarily put a name on. These are all provoked by something that you experienced from a sense perception. And then it becomes your response to that, or your reaction to that. And if what you experience through sense perception is toxic and you have a toxic reaction to it, then you create a great deal of garbage in your head, which you don't need because it will damage your mind, which means you will not be able to use your mind for what it's there for. And it's not there for the purpose of major warfare, although that's going on a lot of the time because people are not really expert in managing the input to the mind. So these practices help us to do this and to create gates. You guard the gates, and this will not come in. And so the main injunction is do not take in anything negative, which is far more important than do not do anything negative. Doing something negative is a reaction to taking in something negative. But the people of morality don't have a clue about that. So they say don't do this and don't do that and don't do the other. It never works because you don't know how damaging it is to you when you receive something negative, words, looks, behaviors, whatever, from any person. And this begins at birth, where you have absolutely no protection whatsoever. And you have no knowledge how to protect yourself. And by the time you figure it out, it's way too late. But here we are, we can do it. And so I would like, during this retreat, which is about silence and the storms, to understand that these storms come from external input, from people, from circumstances, from whatever comes in through your sense organs and disturbs your mind and prevents you from being you, because you become just reactions to this sensory input, much of which is highly toxic and which always pretends to be good for you, but it's not. So the conscience overrides morality. The conscience knows what's right and what's wrong. You have a conscience. Everybody has a conscience. When something is experienced by you which is not good, and the conscience says, oh, that's not good, then what normally people do is they get busy about how not good it is and make it more and more not good, so that it happened not good one time, but you experience it 5 million times by repeating it. This is called self-sabotage. Caring for the mind is very much connected with catching these things as soon as they occur and stopping it, sending it out. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. You don't belong in me. Enjoy your life. And then you make yourself as a person who is alone. Most people don't really like the idea of being a person who's alone because it's lonely, right? But if you take it a little further, a person who is alone is free from this stuff. A person who is alone considers it their right to say, have a nice day, which is a polite way of saying go to hell. When any toxic stuff comes in that you do not block, you see. So blocking it is important. And this is a very, very important instruction over Raj Yoga, which hardly anybody notices, though it gets told a million times, but people don't get it because it doesn't correspond with what you've been told for generations. You've been told that you mustn't do anything bad, right? But nobody ever told you you must not allow anything bad to touch your mind. And you have that right. And so practice, because when you're here, nobody's going to necessarily do anything bad to you, but when you're sitting quietly, you remember things that happened which were bad and that you allowed in. So retroactively, you go in there and you take that thing and you say, thank you very much, go away, you don't belong here. This is like cleaning your mind. These memories will come again, again, and again because they hurt. And it's just normal for a mind to repeat something that's unpleasant. It doesn't make much sense, but that's what we do. So it's more logical to train the conscience, or to allow the conscience to do its job, which is, okay, that wasn't very nice, thank you very much, not interested. Rather than, oh, that wasn't very nice, oh, that's so horrible, and it goes right in and stays there. Do you see what I mean? This practice of rotating your mind to think only of those things which correspond to the essential you, the light that you are. Anything that doesn't correspond to that, your conscience is designed to flag it up. But this got overridden by human ideas about what's good and not good, which they didn't get it right, never mind. But now you send it back where it came from. And gradually keep your mind like a beautiful starlit night sky or a beautiful sunny day or a beautiful sunset, but only beautiful things. And you are free and you are independent. To be alone is to be the master. And people are so trained that being alone is bad. Actually, it's not bad at all. Being alone is fine because you are alone with something higher. And when you're not alone, the something higher is no access, you see. So you need alone time in order that your time with people is where you are, spreading your beauty, and that you are taking only beauty. You're not interested in toxicity because you don't have to. And then your mind becomes more and more able to carry you to spaces where you experience non-physical, not exactly sensations, but perceptions of the divine, of peace, of bliss, of purity. You become able to nurture yourself with these energies, which, as long as you're in sense perception, you don't have any access to it. And to pull out these toxic things that have been in enables you to get access. This is silence. But there's a storm involved because all this stuff that came in is sticky. The analogy for it is rust. So in metals, you have gold, which doesn't tarnish. So if you make yourself gold, then nothing will tarnish you. And you keep yourself gold, pure. And then you have silver, which gets a tarnish that is like a coating, which protects the metal. And so it's not bad. You could just rub it off and it's fine. Then you go to base metals, and the toxicity eats the metal. And when you get to iron, the rust, you can't get it off. So yoga is very often spoken about as a process of burning the soul to remove these toxic base metals. And this is why it's called alchemy. But the essential alchemy is to come into this type of silence where you are rotating these thoughts so that your mind doesn't go rigid. You go round and round and round around this point to get to the point of the point that you are. What is the point of existence? You are the point, so you are most important. And this generates a fire. If you are tense, you can't get it. So you have to rotate patiently. And then you can gently, it's kind of like a levitation, right? You just go from this gross type of consciousness to something more and more subtle. Of course it takes time, but you experiment with this and aim to go into a silence where you can feel, you can perceive things that are outside sense perception and which are very beautiful, very pure, and this heals your soul from endless amounts of garbage that happened. And this will also heal your body. You can't really avoid bad things being experienced in life. There's all sorts of stuff that happens. But when you have this, then you can remove it, which is not avoiding it or pretending it never happened, but you're understanding it as what it is, and you're working through it, but you're not allowing it to eat away at your soul, because it doesn't need that. That's not what you're about, having things eat away at your soul. Then you become free, easy, even when things are not that great. You keep them on the outside. You go further and further in. You could say gross, subtle, spiritual going inside. You can look at it that way. You can do many things with your mind that you can't do otherwise. So does this make sense to you? Collect your thoughts about this, because these are quite subtle things and they don't necessarily have agreed upon terminology. So analogies and metaphors tend to be used. The overall purpose is to care for the mind, so the mind is free. And then your conscience, listen to your conscience. How many times you don't listen? Then you say, oh, I knew, but I didn't. So you can kind of note those things and try to listen more attentively, trust it, because this is the best guide you have. Aim to get access to your mind in such a way that you realize what an incredible instrument it is when it's not caught up in this toxicity. It can do all kinds of things for you, which is a real yoga, take you to all kinds of spaces, which is very healing, very restorative, very strengthening, and make you very resilient in a difficult world. And even if we have big storm, which is always going to happen when you do this kind of practice, all hell will break loose in your mind. Because it has to break loose so you can chuck it out. Otherwise it claws inside you. You don't want that. To have physical silence is quite good for just helping us to become more and more with ourselves and explore the idea of being a person who is alone, because such a person can be a master and very interactive, but at the same time alone, non-dependent. And then also when you're alone, you have more capacity when something toxic, manipulative, whatever wants to come in and take over your mind. You are in a better position to say, have a nice day. See you later. You don't belong in me. Thank you. So then mind and heart, you see, becomes essentially the same thing. You don't want your heart polluted, broken, shattered, speared, all the things that people do to each other's hearts, because you protect yourself. Say, okay, thank you very much. Bulletproof heart, very good. But it doesn't mean that you are blocking everything, you see, because that's throw out the baby with the bathwater. So the very fine separating of what's good and what's not good, this is the work of conscience.